Hello and welcome to episode 93 of Kaiju Curry House, the fortnightly show that gives you a healthy dose of kaiju goodness every other Monday. Today it's myself, Paul, along with Smokey Joe, and
howdy, folks.
Pleased to say we have Bob Eggleton, a 9-time Hugo Award winner for Best Artist in Science Fiction and Fantasy. Welcome, Bob.
Oh, hey, good to be here.
Thank you for joining us today.
Fantastic to have you on the show, Bob.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking all about you and your career, but as our listeners know, we have to start off with the question. Joe, what have Kaiju been up to?
What have I been up to? So I have been up to a variety of things, a lot of which have been taking up my time. I actually can't discuss, but I have been back in reading. I've been enjoying a couple of new dinosaur books that have come out on the market. I'll share those in the if nothing else section of this podcast. And then I have essentially been rewatching the Dinosaur Planet trailer over and over again. I think that's what Joe's been up to recently. Have you either of you seen the Dinosaur Planet trailer?
Oh, the one that's just coming on BBC?
It's the Apple TV one, but it's Sir David Attenborough who is doing the dialogue for it.
Yeah. Oh, that's the one. Yes. That's the one. I think Apple TV's running it, but I think BBC over here we have BBC America.
Yeah, there's a lot of the BBC cronies that are kind of like coming in and helping with it.
What's happened here is BBC America's become part of this. They're part of the Discovery Channel now. So every Saturdays and on weekends and some nights they have to show animal programs. Or they should show like one week they had a whole thing on the planet Earth. It's called Planet Earth, and they did something with another dinosaur series that somebody had done, and then they showed Godzilla 2014 as part of all that, and it was just
the Discovery Channel showed Godzilla 2014.
No, it was no. What's really funny is the Godzilla 2014 over here has been shown by some of the strangest outlets. One is a place
I didn't know it was a documentary. To be fair, that's a new one on me.
It's the thing on. It used to be WGN, and it's a superstation out of Chicago. And now they become like News Nation, which they claim they're more fair and balanced news, this kind of thing, like that. And what they show is it's just news programs and America's Most Wanted, all that kind of stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, it's like Godzilla comes on, and then they show something else, and then they go back to news. And so everybody's trying to figure out like that. BBC America's done the same thing. They can't decide whether they're the Star Trek channel or they're the the Planet Earth channel now. It's like, as they show Star Trek, oh, Planet Earth, let's put on Planet Earth. And then they'll show Doctor Who, and then they'll show Godzilla 2014. And that's, it's been on several times. And but they tie it in with kind of like, it's Planet Earth week on BBC America, and 8 p.m. on Monday will be Godzilla, like that, this sort of thing. And it's like, whatever, it's strange how it's been, it's strange how it's cropping up a lot. So yeah,
it's really cool though. I'm really excited for Planet Dinosaur because we have a Carnotaurus in it, favorite dinosaur there, and you can tell that just by the brief segment that we saw, some of it was taken from All the Yesterdays, which is an amazing book, one of the books that I read recently. And for anybody who hasn't heard of that, you need to check it out. It's on Amazon. It is not expensive, but it will blow your mind. Right. A lot of the images from that book regularly appear on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and they're just like, Can you believe that people thought this, or that, this could be the way?
Apple TV is making the MonsterVerse series.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah. Apple TV is getting on it.
And it's this close to signing Kurt Russell as like the main guy, like who's going to be in. Yeah, that's news. Yeah, it's you can just Google it, and it's the new news. He's in negotiations to be in the MonsterVerse TV show, and so it's going to be interesting.
Escape from Monster Island.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I think he'd be great. I think they gave him a great character. I think he's one of those actors that went from being a child actor to being like a really, really great adult actor. You know what I mean? As well, like doing the Santa Claus movies he did for Netflix, which are hilarious. Stuff like that. So I think he's gonna be great in the show. If he's in it, I think he's gonna be fantastic in that series, and I think he's gonna be great.
That's really cool. Well, anyways, I have had my pun. Bob, I'm going to direct this at you now. What have Kaiju been up to?
What have I been up to? Oh, what have I not been up to? Well, I've been working on the illustrated version of King Kong. It's going to be coming out next year. And it's going to be like between 10 and 11 paintings. We actually haven't decided. I'm sort of offering them 11, and they're wondering if they've got the budget to do 11, which is fine, but I've already completed 8. So we're nearing that kind of conclusion of that. And it's some of the best work I've ever done. It really is. And I can't use the typical, what you see in the movies. I was explaining earlier, I can't use the movie icons. I can't use anything with a 33 Kong or any of the other Kongs that have been made, because that's all under a film trademark thing. But the original Delos Lovelace novelization, written in 1933, is not under that. And it's really interesting because it's a little bit differently paced and differently described than the way the film came out. For example, when Ann Darrow comes across, when she's taken off by Kong in the jungle, she's put in this, on the tree, and then the meat eater shows up. He's just described as the meat eater with a long head, a long neck, and he hopped. And they don't say Tyrannosaurus Rex. They don't say anything like that. So I took my liberties and did my own kind of idea of kind of like
you made a kangaroo, didn't you?
Like a retro Tyrannosaurus, basically. And sort of like I figured we're not worrying too much about, we're just doing by what is described in the book. So I did kind of what could be considered a hopping looking meat eater, you know what I mean? And he's battling, and everybody seemed to really love the painting. And so I'm happy that they like it. And, but and it's and then in another sequence is the Stegosaurus is in one, but they traded it out with a Triceratops. So where they said, look, fellas, it's something from the prehistoric age, like that. It's actually the Triceratops you're looking at. And so it's a little bit different from the movie. And so, and it gave me a lot of liberties to go in that direction. And then there's the other book, which will be coming out in the UK, and I don't want to say too much about it, but that's going to be really great. I've got the cover and 3 interiors and a couple of colors on the inside, and it'll be, it's going to be really nice. And I promise I'll give you all the information about it when I'm allowed to give it to you. So
that's great. We're definitely going to have you back on to discuss that awesome project that's going on in the UK.
Oh yeah. So it's been all this, and I've been working on some other things and trying to deal with some, just every day, in this post-pandemic or whatever the heck it is now. I'm losing my mind. I mean, it's between the Ukraine and the pandemic. It's like, crazy. And it's one of those things, you wake up in the morning, you go, I'm alive.
There you go. So now I think it's Paul's turn. Paul, what have Kaiju been up to?
Oh, I finished it.
You finished the picture book.
The massive alien book.
What'd you think?
Look at the size of it. It's huge. It's really good. Yeah. So I've been reading it in chapters. Kind of just so each week of the podcast, I've been talking about different films. So I've finally finished Alien Resurrection now. I already knew some of the stuff, like the ending was going to take place on Earth, for example, and that got scrapped. But the director was French. I knew that, but I don't know, he didn't speak any English, so I don't know how they managed on set, but that must have been quite interesting. And he was known for comedy.
Jean-Pierre Jeunet, I think his name was.
Yes, that's the one.
And he did The City of the Lost Children.
Yes. He said he went and he watched that while he was staying in America. He literally went to the cinema to see it, just to remind himself of, like, he said he watched it, but just saw all the errors. So he then made a list of all the things he did wrong in that film, so he would not repeat them for Alien Resurrection.
Well, it's really funny because he you know what, he got a lot of accolades for that film, and that's gig got him Alien Resurrection, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yeah, sounds like it.
About it. She was talking about, they did these 4 things, and she goes, get the latest hot director to do something that's really completely takes it in another direction. I used James Cameron, and it was Dennis, what's his name, Fincher.
David Fincher.
David Fincher, yeah. And then the same thing, I think, just as an extension of that, think of what happened with Godzilla 2014. We had Gareth Edwards, one of British, and he did a $50,000 film or £50,000 film? Monsters. And he had a crew of 6. They bring them to Mexico. They had 6 guys and different cameras and stuff like that.
Yeah, he did all the special effects on his laptop. Amazing.
Yeah. It is amazing, isn't it?
and he was apparently working in a warehouse to make money to pay some bills. And he said between that, he'd go back in and he'd be on his laptop doing the special effects for the movie. And then when it came out, the story goes is that he, and this ties in with what happened with Alien, how Alien, he went to Legendary and they were talking about working with him. Thomas Tull was wanting to do something much lower scale and much probably direct to video or whatever. And then he said across the table, he looks at him and he said, how would you feel about doing Godzilla? And they said that we can't get anybody really to do this. We're trying to find somebody. We can't do it. So he said, you seem to be the type of guy that would be open to and he just threw it. And he said, what you always say, yes. And apparently he walked out of the room and had an anxiety attack. at the idea of a $200 million budget or $180 million, that type of thing. So and that's what they do. They do these great art films like that, like The City of Lost Children. That was an art film. It really was. It played in art houses here. I had to go to Boston to see it, for instance.
Yeah, it's always great when they put it's like that Neil Blomkamp, isn't it, as well? How he kind of he came out of District 9 after doing a very low budget film and TV commercials. So it's amazing what they can do.
It is fun. So with that, we have to get to Kaiju Letters.
Oh,
Paul
yes.
has your regular.
Yes, we have. It's more of a comment than a question, but I think it's valid enough that we should comment it. So yes, we've heard from Tom Tyler, friend of the podcast for sure. He's written in, first of all, saying happy 3rd birthday, because we've literally just been going now for 3 years.
Yep, that we have. Thank you, sir.
So thank you for that. And what he was suggesting is that at the end of the show, where we have If Nothing Else, he was wondering if we could have just people write in with their suggestions for If Nothing Else, rather than just our own, all the guests. So
that could open up some floodgates, but I'm totally up for trying it.
It got me thinking a bit about this kaiju questions, and I was thinking, well, instead of that, instead of it just being kaiju questions, what if we call this kaiju conversations, which kind of flows a bit better?
Ooh, yeah, that could
and
be
people
thing,
write in, then they can say, oh, I've just seen this. Have you? What did you think? If not, I recommend it.
Mm-hmm. So this is where I plug Tammy and the T-Rex every week.
So you could say, yeah, you could say, Joe, I saw Tammy and the T-Rex, you've got to check it out. But a listener could write in and say, I just saw something rather, and it was amazing.
Children, ask your parents before you watch Tammy and the T-Rex, okay? Just ask your parents.
I have managed to get that. I found it on one of the streaming services, and so I am going to watch that at some point soon, I hope.
Oh Lord, Bob, have you seen Tammy and the T-Rex?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's a treat. They knew exactly what they were doing with that movie.
Oh, that's funny. I should check it out then.
Oh, the whole reason the movie got made. Friend of the director. Hey, I got this animatronic dinosaur for a weekend. You want to make a movie?
Oh God. Well, that sounds like the Roger Corman School of Filmmaking, or anybody, how they just throw a movie together.
I know, but it's got like Denise Richards, and I think his name was Paul Walker, right?
Paul Walker, yeah.
Yeah, it's got Paul Walker and Denise Richards in it. It's just like, what?
Yeah, I mean, look at actor Eric Roberts. He's in like everything. And I have one of my Facebook commenters who's a director, and she said, if you wanted to do like a documentary or something on yourself, painting or whatever, Bob, she goes, he'd narrate it for $200 like that. And she said, I'm serious. She said, I'm absolutely serious. They'll just, if it's a check, they'll show up for it. And so that's what I think maybe some of it is. Yeah. Denise Richards, she's not been in much lately.
Oh, this was early in her career.
Oh, okay. Right. Before she became a Bond girl.
Yeah. I mean, I have it sitting on one of my shelves, because that's just not a movie that you can take the slipcover off. You got to keep it pristine because it deserves that kind of treatment. Anyways, back to Kaiju Letters. Thank you very much for the comment. That will be taken under consideration by the team. Sounds like a good one. So in Joe's line of questioning, we have Angela. And Angela is asking a pretty simple one, but I figure since we have Bob on here, it's worth bringing up again. What is your favorite kaiju and why?
Well, I could say Godzilla, but I'd be in a crowd. So this got asked me a long time ago, and we all decided what was our second favorite kaiju. And
Good way of looking at it. Yeah.
for me, it's Veyran, because
Ooh.
he's such an ignored little. I even wrote an essay for Famous Monsters about Varan, and I actually titled, the working title was Ode to Varan, because he was in one movie, and then he was in an appearance, and
he might as well have been stock footage. Yeah,
it should have been. Yeah,
he does this and destroy all monsters. Like that, bye. Like that. He's off camera, and it's like, but in the original, what they had done, and it's a kind of a weird thing, because I'd written an article on it, and with August Ragone, we did some research on it. He gave me some good research on it. That it was originally intended to be an ABC TV movie in the United States at the time, and ABC pulled out of it and left Toho with this kind of widescreen black and white movie, and they were all into Toho scope color at the time. So they were kind of stuck with this black and white movie in the age of color, which is like around 1958 or whatever it was. And they kind of didn't know what to do with it themselves. They released it, and it came out to not great fanfare, as I understand it.
Well,
But
the American version is abysmal, to be fair.
the American is racist. It's just terrible.
It's not worth watching. I like Varan, but I will not.
They insert him like from his porch. He can see everything going on. Like, oh look, Varan's in Tokyo, or oh look, what I mean? It's like, huh? It's like, okay, because they just inserted him on, and he has like a housekeeper, and he just berates her all the time, and all this, and what they had done is, originally it was going to be released in the United States by the same company that was going to redo, you remember Gigantus the Fire Monster, Godzilla Raids Again. They were going to retool some of the footage from Godzilla Raids Again into a proposed Ib Melchior script called The Volcano Monsters. And that was going to be made for US distribution, in which like a unnamed Tyrannosaurus Rex and an unnamed Ankylosaurus start having a battle, and they wind up in San Francisco. And that's the idea of them being in Chinatown was going to be the explanation for the architecture, the Asian architecture. And they were going to insert all this other footage around it. And they even Toho even made 2 new suits that got sent to the US, to Howard Anderson Company, to do the effects work, to do some additional effects. And it was just never used. And Bob Burns was a witness to those suits. He'd actually seen the crate they were in. And anyway, it just never got used. So it was eventually picked up by Hugo Grimaldi, who's no stranger to, he did a lot of spaghetti westerns and things of that nature, and taken to Warner Brothers, and they dubbed it with Key Luke and George Takei doing most of the dubbing. And they cut it to pieces, and it's literally, even Gigantus the Fire Monster is a hard watch when it's, Godzilla Raids Again is a much better watch, but there's a musical interlude thing that they've chopped right out, everything like that. But Gigantus is this badly dubbed, like they, at one point they get George go, "Oh, banana oil," just to fill someone's mouth with the right, thing. But Varan was a similar thing, where they had this film and they backed out of it. So Crown International eventually picked it up in 1962. And they figured, well, we don't like the flying sequences. Like, they didn't like Reptilicus flying. Remember Reptilicus flew? They didn't like that. So chop that out. And so get this out. Well, let's put in Myron Healy, and he has to be this guy that's involved with the U.S. military, and they're doing desalinization things on some island, and he can see everything going on. You know what I mean? And he's rude and
terrible. He's just a terrible human being.
But the original Veyran has got some incredibly moody scenes in it. Right,
it's good too. Like, the biologists have a reason to be there. Like, the village's religion is like, it's not looked down upon or made silly. Yeah. Like, the reason that Varan can shrug off tank shells is like, it's understandable at the very least. Like, it's a good movie.
Yeah, at the time, when they made this movie, there were parts of Japan that literally were a wilderness. I mean, when I'm saying that, they were isolated, and you had people that lived, as you saw the village, they were isolated from everybody, and they had their own kind of religion, their own kind of theory, their own ideas, and then these guys come in, and then you don't even see anything at first. You just see this giant shadow moving through the trees, and it is wow. There's some sequences where it's just literally Varan is sort of moving through the trees, and you don't see his leg, or you might, and it's or you see them looking up, and then suddenly they're covered by a shadow, and then that's it. You know, I mean, they were told not to go into this area, and they went through this gate, and they went in anyway, and then they got killed. And then some other people show up to discover what's going on, and this thing, of course, they try to kill it, and it only succeeds in chasing it out of the lake, and it heads to Tokyo, and so on. But that's what is it's kind of it's kind of the most not honored kaiju, I'm going to call him, that Toho has done, because every other one has had at least a couple of other appearances in movies, but Varan just didn't, or Baran, as he's called, Baran, Daikaiju Baran. He just didn't, and Haruo Nakajima plays the monster, as he did.
It has like the bones of a really great movie. It just didn't have the marketing. That's
yeah, exactly
really what it came down to.
And they had one release poster. They had absolutely no.
It's like the Iron Giant of kaiju movies.
Bingo, exactly. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And it's really kind of, it's an eerie looking monster, and of course it's a lake monster too.
I really like how on the suit, like the spines going down his back, the backlighting actually caught clear plastic tubes that they cut up. Those were just like regular pipe tubes that you use.
Yeah, they sheared them off.
They sheared them off, but the way that the light kept them, it made them look like they were illuminated or painted. I thought that was a great little effect.
And the only other chance that we had for Varan to appear again was when Shusuke Kaneko originally pitched the idea of GMK, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, in 2000, 2001. And his original script had the Guardian monsters, where it was Godzilla, and it was versus Anguillus, Varan, and Baragon, yeah. And now they kept Baragon, but the other two literally,
we have to put Mothra and Ghidorah into everything. Yeah, it's a rule.
They sell, isn't it?
Literally sat down in Toho, and they said, "We love your story, but we can't. These two monsters, they're not good for marketing and toys.
Nope. So,
you need to rethink it. Think of, and in fact, we'd like you to rethink it with Ghidra and Mothra in it." Well, apparently, as a screenwriter that he is as well, he's a writer as well. He just had to sit there apparently for 15 to 20 minutes and actually think about how to retool that. And he said, "Okay, I can." He went to his other writer with him, and he said, "Like, I think we can do this. We can do it." And he's not shy about talking about how it was all done for merchandise. It was done for merchandising purposes. And
I like how in protest he gave all three of the Ghidorah heads basically Varan's head too.
Oh yeah. Janata made them.
Yeah. So we have one more question. So this comes from William, and I think it's actually a really nice question. So you're trying to get somebody into the kaiju fandom. What is the first film that you show them?
Oh,
that's a good
one.
I
think that's a cool question.
That is a good one.
That's a good thinking question.
It depends how old they are. That's one thing. And two, I would say
we're looking to indoctrinate children here, Bob. Come on, we gotta keep the fandom going. It doesn't matter what time frame the movie's from.
You know what really I can't say what did it for me, because what did it for me was the original Ideal Godzilla game that came out in the US in the 60s. And that made me love Godzilla. And the first Godzilla movie I saw, and this might be a potential candidate for that, is King Kong versus Godzilla. That's a good one. Another, because you've got King Kong, which is a little bit of a, we've got a little bit of a Western sort of impetus in there, Then we have the other ones I would consider would be Monster Zero, or Invasion of Astro Monster, because it's got Nick Adams in it, and he carries a lion's share of the dialogue, and he's very funny. And he and Akira Takarada have this great chemistry together when they're working on screen. You can see it, and it's a great human story. It's a fun. It's the only one of them all, and this gets its share of problems with some of the fans, because there's 10 minutes of monster footage in the whole thing, and some of that is stock footage. And it's because they decided to backseat the monsters and make the human this love story going on between Miss Nemikawa and astronaut Forrest Glenn. That's his name. It says F. Glenn. His name is Forrest Glenn. And they make that the kind of the big upfront kind of thing going on, and the kind of the relationship of him with Akira Takarada and the goofy Akira Kubo playing, Tatsue, and those things make for it to be a warm movie. I find, and then the pacing of it is great. It's just, it doesn't drag. It just, I can put it on and in 90 minutes it's just gone like that. You know what I mean? It doesn't drag at any one time.
Yeah, that was my first film. So I saw that when I was about 7.
It works, apparently.
And it worked, so no disputes on that one.
Yeah.
I had Terror of Mechagodzilla as mine, and I've spoken about that before in the podcast, but if I was looking to indoctrinate somebody, I mean, I feel like I think you can definitely throw a lot at the 90s Godzilla versus Ghidorah or the 90s Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. I think that both of those two movies give a pretty good taste of what Godzilla is. And then I think if we were going to go outside a Toho franchise, I feel like the Dino De Laurentiis Kong, it can be a bit hit or miss with folks. The 1933 Kong, I think you need to have an appreciation for what it is.
Exactly.
Peter Jackson Kong is
Peter Jackson
you
Kong
could fall asleep if you're the
it's
wrong
quite
person.
long, but it's good.
But
I mean, something like
the way-
Pacific Rim would probably do.
Yeah, I was
Well,
going to say Pacific Rim is a pretty good one, but if we're going to go with, like
Depends,
old school stuff,
Yeah,
I'd say that Gorgo's a worthwhile contender.
Gorgo's a
Okay.
great one.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, Gorgo's a worthwhile contender because it's a very straightforward plot. It hits all age groups. It's just people making bad decisions consistently. So it's a great film. But I always stick up for Beast from 20,000 Fathoms because I think that, as the OG radioactive monster movie, it hits a lot of really great notes. You've got Ray Harryhausen who worked on it. And then you've got the fantastic Ray Bradbury story, which is The Foghorn, which is a great short story. Everybody should read that. It's fun.
Yeah,
I think
you
hit those, you're done, right?
No, I was going to say that also. It's funny you bring up those films because both Gorgo and Beast from 20,000
Same director.
director. He did the giant behemoth, or as you call it, behemoth, the sea monster. So he's worked with Ray Harryhausen, Willis O'Brien, and then he did Men in a Suit work. You know what I mean? And Gorgo's special effects are largely, I guess, Tom Howard did them, I believe. I guess the guys that were involved with, remember the Curse of the Demon or Night of the Demon, you call it, where you see the giant demon head come up at the. I think they also did Gorgo's suit work. And yeah, Gorgo's a great one because it's a great mother story. It's a great
mother story. But then what I have an appreciation for in Gorgo is how they integrate the suit, the man in the suit effects, with the rest of the scene. Most of the scenes in Gorgo take place against like a black or red night sky. And the way that they overlaid Gorgo in a lot of those scenes, or the people on beaches or whatnot, they fit them in so seamlessly that you couldn't see like the black shadow lines. George Lucas had a problem with this when he had like the Rancor in Return of the Jedi with Luke Skywalker. I'm not going to tell anybody, I'm not going to spoil that film for anybody, but when you're watching that scene in the previously unupdated versions where George hasn't like tweaked things, you would see a shadow where they put one cell frame over another in order to get that mashed effect. But what would happen is you'd have like a Rancor shadow, like an ever so like faint line. It's almost like it was animated on and someone still had like the drawing lines on it.
Right.
So when they did that with Gorgo, because it was so dark in that movie, whenever Gorgo was making an appearance, nothing stood out. And I remember being me and thinking like, well, wow, Gorgo, I mean, I know that's a person in a suit, but this looks so much better than when Godzilla does it.
When
But-
Gorgo came out on Blu-ray here a few years ago, I was sort of a contributor to it, in the sense of I contributed some of my toy collection, and I saw my lobby cards, and I couldn't believe what I actually saw on that. As a side note on this, I saw this on an auction house, and it was in England too. All of the concept drawings of Gorgo, and they were just gorgeous. They were these watercolor gouache drawings of what
Oh, that's
Gorgo
cool.
looked like. And oh my God, if you didn't mind maybe tapping into a retirement account or something, you actually, it was doable to get these things. And it was really backwater. It was really not even something that was being noticed. It might have been on eBay even. I don't know.
Well, this is the thing. In the UK, the monster film community isn't necessarily given the limelight. So thank goodness we're having like a pop culture resurgence of this genre, but like that sort of thing doesn't tend to get noticed as much.
Yeah. VCI, when they released the Blu-ray, by the way, my friend Lee was involved with this, and he just contacted me out of the blue, and he said, do you want to contribute anything in terms of, and originally we were going to have me do a poster for it that came with it. You send away a coupon, you get the poster. But VCI Video, and it's just, frankly, they ran out of money on it. And what had done them in that regard, I mean, it did well, but they had remastered they had it remastered. They got a copy of the movie that had not been previously seen, like it'd been in a vault or something, right? So how we were talking about that weird, the lines you were talking about, the matte line, that kind of weird, blue edge and stuff like that. All that's been gotten rid of in the new remastered version. And the sound is much better. It doesn't have this weird hiss to it, it's a much better thing. But VCI, they spend all their money on restoring it, and I mean the darks in it are really dark night in it. It's not that kind of brown over the time. How things fade away and they get like and the matted elements separate out and things like that. All got resolved. And they found a absolutely gorgeous IP of it somewhere in a vault, and it was collectors or something like this, and it was just, and strangely enough, Gorgo, many people think it's a public domain movie, and there's a lot of public domain labels that was on. It's not. It's actually owned by 20th Century Fox of all places. And
Disney owns Gorgo. This is amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Disney owns Gorgo, I guess, and it was on because I knew that you're familiar with Club Daikaiju. They did a vinyl toy with M1 Go in Japan. And it's a gorgeous item. And my understanding was they had to get all the permissions at the time from 20th Century Fox because they were the one. It was part of Genesis Entertainment, which was part of something else, and it's overseen by 20th Century Fox. So that's the film vault. This film was sitting in, was 20th Century Fox's, and but it's that all having been said, it's a terrific film because it's a great build up to it, and you remember the history of it where there was some Japanese investors involved with this whole thing, and they wanted to prove that somebody could do something as well as Godzilla. So that's what they did. They paid the King brothers and some British filmmakers to do to make this giant monster movie. And so there you go.
Indeed. Well, we're going to take our first break now. And then we get back, we're going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Bob. Hello and welcome back to Kaiju Curry House. We are here this evening, at least in the UK, with Mr. Bob Eggleton, who is a phenomenal artist and apparently an expert in all the right films. So, Bob, one of the main draws of having you on the podcast is, of course, your amazing art. Can you tell us how you got started? Where did you join this profession?
Well, I started when I was about 4 years old. My father showed me how to draw. And I sort of knew what I wanted to do. And then I saw Star Trek. I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I said, these interests I have in science fiction, this interest I have in art is really, and the first idea was I wanted to be a comic book guy. And I thought it was really easy. I thought, oh man, it'd be great. Well, as we know, it actually isn't really easy. But I was a child of those days of the Marvel bullpen in the 1970s when, everybody, comic books looked like they were just made just for you, and you could get a lot for a couple of dollars, and so, and you'd have kind of a, Stanley soapbox and all that. And you felt like there was this weird connection, like, you could, one day aspire to get into the drawing and go to see these people and talk to them and want to get into it and all that. And that's what I did. I kind of like started meeting some of these artists when I got older in high school. I got to know some artists, and they all said to me, just pursue it, go after it. And that's what I've done. And but I think my first, I sold a painting when I was 16 years old. I sold 3 paintings. So I would say those were my first professional sales. They were landscape things. They weren't even, they were British landscape things. In fact, they were. A woman who was from England wanted a picture of something involving this cottage with the Cotswold stones. And you guys know what I mean by that. And, and anyway, so I did that, but $100 a painting, that's a lot of comic books,
that's good stuff, man. Yeah.
1976, that was good comics. Well, then the 80s came, and I started going to science fiction conventions, and I started putting my work up at these art shows. And this is a thing that's very hard to do now because it's all different. The dynamics all different. Publishers would show up at these conventions and they'd say, "Hey, we really like your artwork. You think about doing book covers for us?" And, "Oh, cool, yeah, all right." And I was aiming for comic books at one point, but I got segued into doing book covers, and that's how sort of I started painting and stuff like that. And everything went from there. It really did. And I always maintained the interest in the thing of all things like Godzilla, space, all kinds of stuff like that. I have this thing of like, it's all part of the same thing, like I can make the connections of 2001: A Space Odyssey to Godzilla, and the idea, it's an idea of scale. And to that end, in the 2014 Godzilla movie, the Giorgio Ligeti music was used that was actually in 2001: A Space Odyssey in the Halo jump scene. So, there's a nice, I always consider that a nice connection.
It's awesome. So like the whole time that you were doing this, that you were persevering, like what's that look like? Like for young artists out there, like what would you recommend to them most? Like what is like the method to stick with it?
Draw really well, draw good. Look at a lot of artists' work and don't try to develop your own style. I found that when I went back and looked at the masters of artists, I mean, you look at some of these guys that are from 1600s, 1700s. They were doing fantasy art, dragons, all kinds of stuff back then. Turner, JMW Turner, he's my favorite painter, and he's considered England's greatest painter. And he did some paintings with dragons and stuff in them, and there it was fantasy art. They just didn't call it that at the time. It was called sublime or romantic, like that sort of thing. And looking at all that, that's where you get. I make these connections to how, I love mythology and dragons and legends of cryptid creatures and, even the Loch Ness Monster, all that stuff. And I apply all of that to Godzilla and that kind of thing. They're just the same thing. It's just, they're just maybe created differently by science. That's all. But my feeling is this: when you do art, just draw, and make sure. Now we have the internet, so you can get your stuff out there on social media and people can see it. I didn't have the internet, so I had to do it longhand, and it came across fine, but it was a very so now if I was to do it now, I'm not sure how I would do it, but this was 35 years ago I was doing this, so I was getting my stuff out there, and it's a very trying process sometimes.
So I got to call you out here. You're saying draw, but you paint.
Well, the basis of all really good painting is drawing. And if you can draw really well, you understand how three-dimensional forms work and things of that nature. Whereas when you paint, that's just simply coloring them in.
Okay, so this is a point here, right? So my partner, Dawn, is a fantastic artist. She really is. She can draw anything, but she hates coloring stuff in.
Oh, we're all scared of that. I did that in my
first
that I won awards for at the World Science Fiction Convention in 1980. It was all black and white. It was all black and white drawings. And I had such luminaries like Michael Whalen and Don Mates and other people come up to me and say, "Well, we really love your work, but you got to paint, my friend. You got to paint." And I'm like, I gotta paint like that. Anxiety attack, So I got some paints and I started learning how to apply color into those things and starting to render and stuff like that. And and the art schools at the time, I got to say, weren't really helpful because it's kind of 1970s postmodern. That's a great word people use when they want to describe nothing. Postmodern. And they want to say, oh, it was all post Vietnam, post Watergate. So everything was this non-representationalism, which is basically you can put a pile of dirt in the middle of a room and stick like a bottle in it and call it like, Untitled Six or whatever. And those type things, that was really what was being pushed. This whole idea of like going into non-representational work because that's where
Taping a banana to a wall.
Exactly. And now it's going back much more to traditional stuff. So now's a very good time because people are learning more about traditional stuff because people that was kind of so faddish and so 70s and it was a great way of being able to do something and do nothing make it look like you're doing something and you're actually doing nothing. You know what I mean? And that's what and that came out of kids getting into school who really weren't even interested in art, but they had to take art classes to get credit. So it was kind of like, okay, we can do this real easy stuff and, this sort of thing. And it was easy to do. But anybody with a lot of talent, there's a lot of wonderful artists out there with talent. I talked to them. My friend John Tedrick, wonderful artist, absolutely fantastic. He's way younger than me. I think he's in his 20s. Oh my God, can he draw? Oh my God, he's so good. And I try to encourage that, and he's working for Magic the Gathering and things of that nature. But there's a whole bunch of young people out there, and they've got better chances than ever to get into these things. It's just that, in the meantime, life got a little more difficult, a little more complicated, a little more expensive. So, yeah.
So someone is scared of coloring stuff in. What do you say to them?
Oh, all right. Well, I'll tell you what it is. You can start with, if you want to learn to paint, this is the way I would recommend. Because I was afraid of working with oil paint. I work with oil paint, I would say 80% of the time now. I was really afraid of working with oil paint. Well, what happened was I had decided that I needed to learn how to do this. So I took small canvases, about 8 by 10 inches, 9 by 12 inches, small. And I figured, well, it's better than ruining a large painting. You know what I mean? A large canvas. So let me just mess around with color. Let me just take color on a brush and mess with it and just really own that canvas. You know what I mean? Own it. And even if nothing comes of it, and it's just a color of mess, at least you've messed up the canvas so that, now you're a little less afraid of taking color and putting it on this white surface. Pablo Picasso said, there's nothing more terrifying than a blank white canvas. And that's really what it boils down to. So yeah, it's afraid of color, but and color can, it's nothing to be afraid of as long as you just know, how to, you own it. You be the boss of it. Don't let it be the boss of you.
There you go.
Practice, face your fears.
So how did you get from space exploration in space, that being your driving interest, Star Trek you mentioned, to working with monsters? So
okay.
Explain that.
The first real thing was dinosaurs. I went to the 1964 World's Fair in Queens, New York. My parents took me there with my grandmother at the time. And we went
Those
down.
Are some amazing models. I've seen the pictures.
And they did the Sinclair dinosaur exhibit. Just Google it. Put Sinclair dinosaur exhibit.
Oh, I've seen it. It's amazing.
Oh my God. Now, it was dinosaur science of the time. They were tail draggers. They were the Tyrannosaurus Rex that was present was kind of the basis for every single Tyrannosaurus Rex right from the 1980s. You had all kinds of other stuff. And I was just so wrapped with these things. They had a Tyrannosaurus, they had a Triceratops, they had a giant Apatosaurus, i.e. Brontosaurus. They still called it a Brontosaurus then. And they even had the wrong skull for it then. But still, there were these dinosaurs. And I was so taken with them when I was 4 years old, 4. Yeah, 4. I was so taken with them that that I found myself, wow, it's a dinosaur, and I love dinosaurs and I loved fossils. And Later, we went to England. I had my mother's from England, so I'm half British, and she's from London. She was a Cockney, and my grandmother was from all there, and we've got all that, and so we would go over there, and at one point we went down to Kent, down to Maidstone, and there was somebody that lived there, or one of their relatives, and they had a backyard that had those. You know what I'm talking about? Those lime deposits. It's all like.
Mm-hmm.
You know how like a lot of England at these giant lime deposits. It's like you go down the Jurassic Coast. It's like you can find fossils just wash ashore. We
I
just
live
had to
along that.
chop into these things, and you would find fossils of sea urchins and even primitive, animals, things of this nature.
Ammonites, ichthyosaurs, belemnites.
And the relative at the time, he was redoing his backyard garden, and he's building into this mountain up in Kent, or this side of the hill up in Kent. And he's just digging this stuff out and giving it to me, right? So I'm bringing him home these beautifully preserved fossils, and so I got into the whole thing of that, and dinosaurs, and the Earth was like, millions and millions of years old. This goes back, millions of years old, and I already knew because I'd seen, I'd seen 1 million years BC. I knew that it was 1 million years old anyway, but I knew it was even older after that, and. What had happened was my mother, she knew I liked dinosaurs. So we're in a store near us, and they sold a lot of toys from the 60s. And they had this game, and it was called the Godzilla game. And it had this greatest picture of Godzilla on the front, the 1962 Godzilla. And it's from Ideal, and you play the game. It's a board game. And it's like, it's all kinds of cool stuff. Like, it's very simple, but you step on a radioactive footprint, and you've got to go be taken to the hospital for radiation treatment to radiation burns. I mean, this is the stuff they made for kids, and
Radiation burns are no joke.
and yeah, I know it's a kid's game, I mean, and my mother got me this thing, and I was just so taken with Godzilla, and I wanted to know what Godzilla was and who he was, and like that. Well, one thing comes to another. Around 1969, 1970. I was taken to see my first, and by the way, my first kaiju film I ever saw in my life when I lived in Pennsylvania was Gorgo, and that was in 1998. And then later, the next one I saw was King Kong versus Godzilla, because at the time they were showing these at theaters and drive-ins for kiddie matinees. We didn't have DVDs or VCRs. We didn't have any of that. So the local cinema, for $1, you could go up, and while your mom did shopping, she'd plant you there, and you'd go in and watch King Kong versus Godzilla. And they'd have a double feature, Universal, of King Kong versus Godzilla and King Kong Escapes. And so we really, that was my indoctrination into this. And so I started drawing these things, and I was really taken with it. And so some of the greatest, earliest Toho movies I'd seen in a theater. And then I come home and I draw pictures of them. And then I got Famous Monsters of Filmland, and they had pictures of them in there. And it eventually just dovetailed into that's what I was going to do. And, I mean, it's a love that I had, but I also like science fiction in general, because I see these giant monsters as an offshoot of science fiction. They're just part of science fiction. And when you get into the science fiction realm, they just, the difference between an American monster movie and a Japanese monster movie is, in the American monster movie, science resolves the problem. The Japanese one, science creates the problem. And so it's a whole different kind of stage that, it's a different kind of thing going on here. But anyway, so that's where it all sort of like came together, and I still like all this. And then of course there's the monster episodes of Star Trek, and you had you remember the show Space 1999. The second season had a lot of monsters in it, because at the time it was being made, that was another interesting thing. Monsters were really big in the US, and so ITC was going to Jerry Anderson, we need more monsters in the show. So you had all these great ones with Dave Prowse and the Beta Cloud one, where he's a big horned creature, and there's another one, Maya turns into something and she's a monster, and then there was this sort of a monster boom in the 1970s, and Famous Monsters was really a testament to that too, because I mean, you're talking a magazine that was printed on newsprint, and it was selling 350,000 copies per. I mean, it was doing that well back in the mid 1970s, and it was because kids were into monsters, and we like Creature of the Black Lagoon. I got to see that on the big screen in 3D too, and I like all that too. I like all that. I like Frankenstein. I like all that too.
I'm currently just waiting for the good weather to come out again, because I have gotten a projector and an outdoor screen. So what I do is I drag the kids out and make them watch the movies that I enjoy, basically. So I'm waiting, because I have a projector that can handle 3D, and I have the glasses so that they can watch Creature from the Black Lagoon in our backyard with all of that. So going back to art again, you mentioned that you really love oils. So how did you end up with oils 80% of the time, as opposed to, say, acrylics or watercolor?
Well, I started off in acrylics because when I talked to some of the fantasy artists who were big at the time, in their late 70s, early 80s, all of them were on deadlines, and they said, well, we don't have time for the oil to dry, so you have to work in acrylics to be really fast. And I had clients, people I'd go and I'd talk to them, I'd say, hey, what do I do? And they say, oh, you got to work in acrylics so it's fast, and we can get it by next Tuesday instead of, we can get it really fast. And then when I met my wife, and my wife's Australian, so I met her, and she came to America, and she'd been painting in oils all of her life. And so she continued painting in oils, and I got a little bit jealous. I was like, wait a minute, she's painting in oil. I can paint in oils too, So, that's when I got to taking little tiny canvases and just messing them up and seeing how I felt working in oil. And that's where everything went from there.
Okay.
And so I got into oils, and I found them a lot more of a richer color. I like acrylics. Acrylics is still good, and I still did about 5 or 6 paintings last year in acrylics. But oils really do have the thing. There's something about them that's really nice.
Do they just blend together better, or?
Yeah, they blend, and they're sensuous. They're pure color. Acrylic paint is, to break it down, is about 10 to 15% actual pigment and color. The rest of it is a sort of a version of essentially Elmer's glue. It's kind of this basis that solidifies very quickly. Whereas oil paint, most of it is 80 to 90% color, and the rest of it is linseed oil. And when it dries by, acrylics dry by the water drying up out of them. So therefore the colors actually change, and paint actually shrinks. Whereas oil, the linseed oil actually dries out, so that what you put on there stays on there, and that's how it's dried.
That's really cool. I was going to say that stuff. I see the appeal now. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. That's really how long does a typical oil painting take to do from that standpoint? You've mentioned that acrylics fast, oils a long time.
Either or. I've worked fast in both, and I can work.
Okay, we're going to take that. Like you are God at painting. So so how long you're finished with the painting? You've put your brush. You've dipped it in your alcohol or whatever solution you're going to clean up. How long can you wait for that painting to dry in acrylic versus oil?
Acrylic, it's drying as I'm working. Mm-hmm. Oil, it might take a night and a day, and environmental factors affect it. If it's humid, it takes a longer time to dry. If it's cold, it takes a longer time to dry. But if it's sort of a dry, warmish day, it'll dry almost overnight. And I also use a basis. It's called walnut oil, and the walnut oil accelerates the drying more.
Very cool. Okay. So who would you say? Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to ask. So who are we'll go with the top 3 inspirations in art. What artists have you looked at and been like, oh my gosh, that's incredible? Like
Gustave Doré, great illustrator. He illustrated the Bible, and he did monsters. He did a picture of Leviathan. He did all these the Book of Revelations. He did these creatures that had multiple arms and stuff. That was right out of the Thing. and this was this Gustave Doré, and he was doing this in the 1800 and something, and then you had you have lots of other guys. I mean, they do these incredible there's one, and I can't remember the artist's name, but there's several artists that have done renderings of the very famous scene from Clash of the Titans where the Kraken comes up and Perseus has got the head of Medusa and turns the Kraken into stone. Well, that entire thing was done these done in traditional old paintings from the 1600s, 1600, 1700. And John Martin, he's another guy. And he did these incredible works of art, and several which involved dragons, and this is a guy who was he showed the end of the earth in a thing called the Great Day of His Wrath, and it's at the Tate, and they had a special exhibit of his work about 10 years ago that I went over to see. I literally said, "Give me a plane ticket, I'm going over." So we went over there, stayed right near the Tate, and went right in there like 3 days out of the time we were there, just to see this incredible show of paintings. And the keynote speaker for the opening of the opening exhibition was Ray Harryhausen.
That's so cool.
And why it was Ray Harryhausen, and he wrote the and what was really cool, you go into the Tate, and it's a big prestigious art museum, and what's in the bookshop? All of Ray Harryhausen's books, the art of Ray, those great art of Ray Harryhausen, they're all in there because had John Martin so associated with that kind of big picture kind of thing. And Ray's keynote talk was, whatever you do, do it big, and he said that John Martin always inspired him to think big in his epics that he would do. And I thought that was just incredible. You have this tried and true museum, the Tate, and they're honoring basically John Martin and Ray Harryhausen. And so it all ties in together. And this is what these are what these guys did. And even Japanese silk paintings that show the yokai and the eight-headed dragon, for instance, and stuff like that. They have these are things that were back from feudal times, and they're showing and now they're the inspiration for all the movies that we've seen come there. So there's a great lineage to all of that. There's a great it goes back a ways, and it's really fun to see it work like that.
No, that's very cool. But so Bob, you've been painting since 4.
Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah,
well, drawing since 4.
And you've won many awards. Do you have a favorite piece that you've done?
Ooh, good question.
My next one.
Your next one.
No, I've got a few pieces that I've done that are really kind of nice. Some of the King Kong work I've just recently done is pretty much up on my favorite list. I've got some other things where I've done a couple of other things over the years, and they all have the bits in them that I really like.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like. I might like one area the way it's working on, that type of thing, but it's just like, and the nice part is if I like the next piece better than the piece I just did, it means I'm getting better and better. So, and that's what I like to do. I like to make sure I'm just getting better, and that's what's important. So to say and I've got a couple of pieces. Yeah, I did some work with Clive Barker, and I did some monsters, the Tortured Souls and the Infernal Parade, the books that came out of these stories. And he's great. He specifically asked me to work with him, and we did. And it's just incredible. Like there's one story he wrote, and it's just this giant creature that comes in from the desert, and it looks like a dog. I mean, it looks like a giant scaly dog. And it's from the Infernal Parade, and it's large. I mean, it's huge. It's several humans high. So it could be considered a kaiju. It could be considered a monster, in that sense. And so that's what it all ties in together, yeah.
Nice. There we go. Well, we're going to have to wrap this.
Okay.
We're going to have to wrap this episode up, unfortunately, after hearing all sorts of wonderful things from you, Bob, honestly. But we always end our episodes with an if nothing else. So this is our time to recommend all the fabulous and wonderful things that we feel other folks would really enjoy if they enjoyed this episode. Bob, would you like to go first?
Other things like other.
Yep. What monster related stuff do you think folks would enjoy if they are into art?
Oh boy, I mean, there's you can trace the history of monsters in art going back, as I said, to back in the days of there was if you remember, there's a great story from England, the St. George and the Dragon, and this is all mythology that has its basis in the story goes is that there was a village by a coastal town in medieval times, and somehow what they believe had happened was a saltwater crocodile about 30 feet long had somehow gotten in the currents from southern waters and ended up there, and it staked out a lot. It was eating livestock, basically. It's coming up out of the water and eating the livestock, so the farmers had to get rid of it, so they hired a guy to get rid of it, and he became St. George and the Dragon. And the story goes is that outside the village there was a recorded on very old records of a giant skull that was hanging in the village's entryway as you came in, and that's where you look at these great stories of where do they get their start from, and that's what I like. That's what I do with my art, is I go back to these original classic artists, because I like to know where they got. I look at their work. Frank Frazetta, he'll say
he's great.
He will say somebody wanted to paint just like Frank Frazetta. I mean, admittedly, I did a couple too like that, but they wanted to do their version of Frank Frazetta. And I tell people now to this day, don't do Frank Frazetta. Go back to what Frazetta liked. And Frazetta liked Gustave Doré. He was a big fan of Gustave Doré's work. And if you look at that and you look at what he's doing, and oh my God, the guy did etchings, and he did, all kinds of stuff with like, really, biblical stuff. And it was all right there. There it was, and so you look at those things and you go back and you find out this is where they got all their ideas of monsters from. And you look at Japanese feudal history, look at some of those, the ideas of dragons and the ideas of what they, and it's incredible what you will find. What you find the genesis of all of that came from, and that's what I did. That's what I like. I like that whole idea. When I did the Book of Sea Monsters in 1998 with Paper Tiger over in London, it sold 35,000 copies. And what the author, the guy who wrote the book, and myself did, was we went back and we looked at old myths of what were, where did these myths of sea monsters come from? So if you're going to go looking, so if you like giant monsters, if you like monsters, go looking at his mythology and dragons and stories of, creatures, Leviathan, Behemoth, stuff like that. All of these things have sort of look what they did with Behemoth. The Behemoth is right out of the Bible, and again, mythology, but it's this. They made him into a monster in the legendary Godzilla King of the Monsters. They gave him the big tusky monster, you know what I mean? And everybody loves him. So he gets a big applause I've seen when it's shown in crowds. And but that's my advice. Just go back and look at the classical origins of all these things, and you'll find exactly where this stuff came from. You'll find exactly the genesis of all these things. Japanese. The yokai, there's these ghosts in the kappa, and these strange ghost stories they were, and that's where all of your monsters came from. It came from all that, and that's what man's always been fascinated with giant monsters, or any monsters really, because monsters are sort of either an outgrowth of what we ourselves, our darker side, or what we fear. It can be personified by a monster. And that sort of thing, and they, of course, you had the classical monsters. You had Frankenstein and the Mummy, Dracula. Well, that when we got into the 50s, we got the atomic monsters, and and that was the fear was the atomic bomb. So we had to get we brought along with it how to personify that fear, and so we made these giant creatures. And so it's modern mythology is what it is. It's just simply modern mythology being told.
Paul,
Okay.
if nothing else, what you got?
So if nothing else, I'm going to recommend a book that Bob illustrated and that I just purposely. So Godzilla Likes to Roar, which is a children's book.
Your kids love that book.
My
You've said it
kids,
so many times.
So my kid, my eldest is 11, so he's way past it. My youngest is 3, and he absolutely adores this book. We can read it sometimes every night for a week. His favorite picture is of all the creatures sleeping, which is Anguirus, Rodan, Manda, and Varan. He did talk about Varan. So yeah, it's so thank you for that. Thank you for your work there, Bob, because yeah, my children have absolutely loved it. Yeah, so that's my recommendation. Joe, yourself?
I have to say, in our house, we have 2 huge fans of the Sea Monsters book that you illustrated, and I actually had to get a Kraken print because that was so requested at our house. But tonight, I'm also going to recommend a book which I just finished reading by Richard Ellis. It is called Sea Dragons: Predators of the Prehistoric Oceans.
Yeah,
and it's quite cool. I thought I'm from Kansas, so I love me a good mosasaur. It was really great. I felt it was easy to digest. So if you want to get into large, dangerous, scaly things of the Mesozoic era, and you're maybe not quite feeling dinosaurs or pterosaurs so much, that's a good book. But yeah, that will just about wrap it up for this episode, folks. Bob, thank you for joining us.
Anytime. I enjoyed it very much.
And everybody else listening, thank you very much. Keep it kaiju.
Thank you.
Yeah.